Good day to you, my friends. Today is the day. Well, yesterday was the day, or whenever you decide to watch this, or if you clicked on it. I hope you're doing well. Now, in the early hours of the day, the other day, PlayStation decided to drop details on its changes to PlayStation Plus, or PlayStation Spartacus, as it's been colloquially known as for the last couple months or so. Now, we've got 3 new service tiers, a combination of streaming and downloadable titles, and the soul of one Jim Ryan. I'm kidding about that part, obviously. But what if I wasn't? Now, if you're here for the first time ever, I would ask that you please stay, maybe subscribe if you like the video, or I would say to you, at least be prepared for the YouTube algorithm to just possibly pelt you with my content for months and months on end regardless. It's just a weird thing that YouTube does, but either way, happy to have you. So let's go over this right here, the PlayStation Plus tiers. Now, ye old Jimothy Ryan took to the PlayStation blog to announce the changes to PlayStation Plus. He basically says how cool they are, and how they were at the forefront of this whole gaming subscription market with providing new games every month with PlayStation Plus, and also then with PlayStation Now with the PlayStation 4. There's really nothing here I think anyone doesn't expect him to say. Like, he's not gonna come out here and say, well, we were doing fine and then Xbox came and lapped us. Well, dude. Sorry, shit, here's some games. It's also not called Spartacus, which I'm sure is a great big bummer to a lot of you out there, including myself, you know? But let's break down these tiers. So let's start with the first tier. Now, this is the most basic tier, which leaves you with all the same benefits you currently have with no change in the pricing, no extra cost to you. You get to keep the same benefits. You're gonna stay with the $10 a month or maybe the $60 a year. The free games, multiplayer, cloud storage, you keep all of that. That's all you're gonna have with that. I think this is probably the tier most people are going to stay in just because they aren't taking anything away, nor are the other offerings, as we'll get into them probably in a little bit, must-haves in my opinion, at least for now, since there's really no specifics and they were kind of light on details on what their library or what they're going to be offering in terms of games and content. Now we're going to move on to this middle tier of PlayStation Plus Extra. This is where you start to see the changes in the service as we know it today. You'll get all those previous benefits that we mentioned before, and plus a back catalog of PS4 and PS5 games to download. I think this is where it's going to be most comparable at this stage to Game Pass. I don't know how appealing this tier is going to be for people or most people until we just know what the library is. Again, it was very light on details in terms of what content's going to be offered, but it does sound good at least at the outset. But the deal comes from the library and what games they're going to be offering with the service. It's also worth noting that there are no plans right now in place to offer day and date games at launch. That's something we'll definitely get into in a little bit later because it seems like that's something that they're resistant to, and also Jim Ryan didn't totally close the door on doing that in the future, but that's something we'll get into later. And this secondary tier is then upping that price from $10 a month to $15 a month. So that's $15 monthly, and then $99.99 for the year. And the value of this tier is really going to rely on the library of titles they plan to offer you. Now, if you're offering games like then there's that utmost tier, PlayStation Plus Premium. This is where you get that true melding and bonding of PlayStation Plus and PS Now. You get all those previous perks that we talked about, and then it's going to add on those additional games onto the catalog. And also, it adds the streaming option to a good number of games, mainly PS3 games, and that's kind of lame, but that's a whole other discussion later. You also get additional PS2 and PSP games. No word on the catalog or how extensive those back catalogs are going to be. You also get game trials, so you can play games before you buy them and try them out. $17.99 a month or $120 for the year. At this tier, it most matches to Game Pass, but again, I'm not comparing them because Game Pass is a lot more extensive and offers way more. The premium tier I can see attracting that enthusiast portion of PlayStation players, people really ingrained in the ecosystem, or provide a cheap option if what you have is a PlayStation and not a lot of money to spend on games. Inevitably, somebody's going to say that this isn't as value driven as Game Pass or doesn't provide more value than Game Pass, and I'll just get out in front of it and just tell you that it doesn't. Based on all these tiers, it's not going to do that. And honestly, it never was going to. But the most charitable read of it from this perspective here is that it does get you a bit closer to that model, and it really is up to you at the end of the day to decide what is good bang for your buck. As a consumer, you can decide what to spend your money on. So if you say to yourself, you know what, this is worth my money, nobody can really fault you for deciding this is a good value for you. If it's not, then it's not, and that's okay too. Let's talk about our friend Jimothy. Jimothy Ryan, a man with expert gaming skills, spoke to GameIndustry.biz about the new subscription service. He clarified why PlayStation won't offer their first-party games at launch, and I think that what he says here kind of makes sense, but also you can probably easily counter it and say that by saying what he's saying here, there's no proof of this happening, but that's all theory at the end of the day. So let's see what he says. We feel like we are in a good virtuous cycle with the studios, explains PlayStation CEO Jim Ryan, where the investment delivers success, which enables yet more investment, which delivers yet more success. We like that cycle, and we think our gamers like that cycle too. In terms of putting our own games into the service or any of our services upon their release, as you all know, this is not a road that we've gone down in the past, and it's not a road that we're going to go down with this new service. We feel if we were to do that, the games that we make at PlayStation Studios, that virtuous cycle will be broken. The level of investment that we need to make in our studios would just not be possible, and we think the knock-on effect on the quality of the games that we make would not be what gamers would want. On the one hand, he's probably right. They probably just can't make the same kind of investment that Xbox can make, and if they even attempted it, their first-party teams might suffer, because the kind of games that they're making, they just need big budgets, and the investment I can see having a detrimental effect on their games. It wouldn't be immediately apparent probably in the immediate time, but you would definitely notice a decline at some point, or at least in quality overall. Maybe not completely, but definitely overall, you'd see a little bit of a decline. Now, of course, that's such speculation. We don't know that that would actually happen, and we have examples that maybe point to the opposite happening, but again, that's just a gut feeling that I'm having based on hearing that. And I think that's speculative, like I said, but I think we can extrapolate that to somewhat, at least with what Netflix does. Like when Netflix first started, it had a lot of good content on it, a lot of good stuff, and started to curate its own content shortly thereafter as they saw the tides changing. But the problem here you see is that Netflix is just going from this super valuable service to basically just shitting out tons of original content just to fill that demand that they have, just to satiate it. They definitely still have some bangers coming out here and there. There's no denying that, but the ratio, in my opinion, has definitely shifted. And I think Xbox has been, or at least has been, the benefit of being a part of a much larger company that can almost exist at a loss, or at least with little profit, for a long time. That's not to say the Xbox division is not doing well, but at least Xbox can kind of walk and chew bubblegum at the same time. Now, could PlayStation theoretically do it if they invested time and resources into it? Sure, but I don't know if it would have the same or be at the same level that we're seeing with Xbox right now. Like I said, there are examples to the opposite of what I just suggested before, like with Forza Horizon 5 in comparison to what's going on with Gran Turismo 7, for why this is not exactly accurate, this whole idea that the investment would not be worth it and the quality would decline if they went on the day and date type of model. And I think that's fair, because GT7 has thus far been kind of a disaster. Maybe not at launch, but shortly thereafter. But I think more that you need to be willing to shore up those investments on the service with the games you put on it. I don't think he's wrong to say if they divest all their games that there's going to be a shift. Maybe it'll be positive, maybe it'll be negative, but it's definitely a mostly improved in theory what he's speaking of, and even what I'm worried about going forward. Further, he goes on to talk about the opportunity they have to grow their subscriber base, but to me it's actually kind of apparent that this model that they have proposed, and with what he says, it's less about getting a bunch of new subscribers, but getting existing members to just upgrade to the next tiers. Or I guess a simple way of putting it is to get you to spend more money, but I guess upgrade sounds nicer, right? Clearly within our existing audience base, we have the opportunity to attract PlayStation owners who are not PlayStation Plus subscribers at present. The additional opportunity is the 48 million PlayStation Plus subscribers and get them to trade up to Extra or to Premium. And our task is made rather easier there by the fact that they are existing PlayStation Plus subscribers. So we have an extremely close relationship with them on many levels. And I think it's clear that this is meant to attract players to upgrade their memberships, or at least it gives PlayStation some kind of competitive option with Game Pass. He does go on here to say how live service games are kind of becoming a subscription service, and they see that continuing, and they're definitely investing in that. He even goes on to talk about that for a little bit, that how he sees those as kind of like subscription services as well. But I will say that one thing I want to be clear about is that he is saying that this could change, at least as far as the day and date stuff. He may change the tune. He said he's not writing this in stone. This is just how they're thinking in the short term when it comes to upgrading and adapting this service. If things change, he seems willing to adapt to that, but clearly he thinks they can keep the same business model more or less without shifting too much. But clearly with this upgrade of service, they know that they had to do something, and this is kind of like the middle ground between a Nintendo and an Xbox. So my full thoughts are this. I think this is just okay. I can get down with it a little bit, but this is very obviously going to be a case-by-case basis. The good news here is that if you have a PlayStation Plus already, you can just keep that basic tier with no change. But if you want a bit more, you can pay a little more. There's no denying there's value in this service, but the value is going to be what you personally want to put into it. The library of games they're going to offer will be important. I can't stress that enough. You need to offer banger on banger, or at least a good amount of them, in order to drive up the value of this service, which they do plan on doing in part, somewhat like with Miles Morales, Returnal, which is awesome. Returnal is awesome. Please go play that. God of War and Death Stranding, to name a handful of games that they're going to have at launch, and they're going to reveal more games in the future. I'm not worried about them being silent on that. And they're having conversations with most of the major publishers to have them represented in some capacity, which I think is cool. So we'll have to see what they're going to put on the service. That's why I can see standard PlayStation Plus subscribers either staying in that tier or at least considering that middle tier right now until they reveal that library. And considering how much it adds to that value for you, that's something that you have to consider. Now, I personally have both PS Now and PS Plus, and I think the worst thing about this is, for me, is the locking of backwards compatibility or some of their old content on PS3, PS2 behind this paywall. Now, PS Now is not the best with streaming, at least in my area. When it works pretty well, but I am disappointed that backwards compatibility does not seem to be getting a bigger priority or concern for PlayStation, because I feel like if they just put a little bit of time and effort into it, they could figure it out, because it does suck. I mean, look, I still have a PS3, so it's not the worst thing in the world to have to boot up that old thing, except it kind of is, because sometimes once you're used to using modern tech, being quick and responsive, the PS3 is legit a dinosaur and it's just slow. Like, I turned it on yesterday and it's still turning on. And part of me realizes that you can totally figure out how to get backwards compatibility working on console if they really just invested that time and money into it. But regardless, here we are. Otherwise, I would say having a handful of games on demand personally doesn't really appeal to me too much, since I don't really play games in that fashion. You know, the fashion of downloading games and trying and playing them a bit if something new comes out, or even jumping around a lot. It's generally not how I consume games. I like to play a game and then really dive deep into it and play it, and that's just not how I consume games. So I don't even really currently use a lot of the services that they're providing with this, so I probably stick to the basic tier unless something entices me on that upper tier. Ultimately, as I've said before multiple times throughout this video, I sound like a broken record at this point, this is going to be the battle for the right catalog of games to prove that there's value in this service beyond what they had before. It needs to continue to evolve over time, adding more titles and more exclusive games. One of the things that I always lamented about PS Now when I started using it is that this is PlayStation's streaming / on-demand service, and they don't even have all of their old first-party games on it. And I would even say now that there's no reason I should not be able to go on PlayStation Plus when it launches sometime in June. That's right, I forgot to say that it's going to launch sometime in June. There's no reason I shouldn't be able to go on PS Plus when it expands and launches later this year and not find, like, I don't know, Ratchet and Clank, the HD collection on PS3 on it. It's going to be streaming only, but it should be on there. Why isn't it there? The Resistance games, right now they only have Resistance 3. There's just these weird holes in the games there, and I really don't know if this is something they plan to address, but they're gonna have to. Having more options is never a bad thing, and I may personally just, again, stick with that basic plan for now until I see if they add anything worthwhile, but That's just me. You might feel differently, and that's okay. We're people. I'm not dissatisfied overall with it, but obviously my reaction is to say, hey, maybe this needs some work, and it's a good base to start with. And I think you'll see a lot of people out there saying it's a disaster and they suck. And hey, look, they're entitled to their opinion. But I feel like you'd be crazy to suggest this is a total loss. All they're really doing is legit combining two services together into one. And that's not as exciting as we all hoped, fair enough, but relax. I don't know what else to say, relax. I think we get too caught up on all of this information suggesting that PlayStation has been teasing this for months when they really haven't said anything. It was just, I think Jason Schreier leaking this information, and then we've just all been talking about it for months as more articles and rumors started popping up. So it's not as exciting as any of us hoped, but fair enough, I guess. I also think some of us get too caught up on white knighting for these different brands, and when it's really honestly just about the average consumer, and if you think there's value in the service that you're paying for, that's on you, man. You got to decide that. It really is just a value proposition and a value discussion, and that's all it really comes down to. But that's really it. PlayStation is going to shore up its subscription service, and I think it's too soon to tell if it's overall going to be worth the price or the uptick in the price, because we don't know what the library is going to look like. I don't think anyone expected this to be a Game Pass equivalent, and if you did, I don't know who you heard that from, but it's clearly an attempt to address that missing component that is in their service from, in comparison at least, to other services. Did that make sense? I feel like that was a weird sentence. I don't know if this is like a big win or even a big loss. It's just kind of like, it is what it is. I hope this is just the beginning of what they plan to add or offer, but that could just be me being an optimist and wanting to believe that this is, or at least this can't be all there is to it. That's just my thoughts, and I'm wondering what yours are. It's good to have more options on any platform, and it's really up to you to decide what is worth it for you or worth your money. Because if they lose your subscription, that's on them, man, to win you back. That's on them. Let me know what you think down below, though. Follow me on Twitter, follow me on Instagram, follow me wherever. Just not in real life. Don't do that. Links are in the description though, so check out my other videos, maybe subscribe, and I thank you all for watching. And I'll talk to you all soon. And I'll talk to you later. I said that twice. Anyway, I'll talk to you later. Love you all. Well, maybe.